All right, so we're starting chapter 5, which is resistance training adaptations. And we talk about acute and chronic adaptations. Acute adaptations are changes that occur in the body with each bout of exercise. So every time I exercise, the body has certain changes. Whereas chronic adaptations are changes that occur over time as we maintain repeated bouts of exercise, and so these are more long-term adaptations. For these chronic adaptations to occur, we apply what's called the overload principle. And the overload principle is as we condition to a workload or a stress put on our body for additional adaptation or changes or improvement, we need to put additional stress on our body to prompt improvement. And so there again, as we condition to the next level for additional improvement, we have to put an additional stress on our body. And in resistance training, this might be increasing the workload or increasing the number of sets. And so your text lists, there's a table that lists all the acute changes that occur with each bout of exercise. And so one of the areas they look at are neurological changes. And they measure the force of production, the force that's produced by the muscle with EMGs. And EMGs are electrodes that can be placed in your skin or internally. And they'll measure the action potential as it spreads over the cell membrane. As an indication amount of force or how much the muscle is stimulated. And so when we look at how does the muscle increase force, we revisit some concepts that we've had before, and one is motor unit recruitment. We increase the strength of a contraction when we exercise by recruiting larger and larger motor units. And if you recall, it's called the size principle, that initially when we start a muscle contraction, we recruit smaller units, and as more and more force is needed, we recruit larger and larger and larger motor units. And then also another way that we can increase the force of our muscle contraction is by rate coding. And rate coding is how the frequency, how fast the stimulus comes to stimulate the muscle to contract. And the shorter the duration between those stimuli, we have something called summation, and that's just the muscle has greater force production because it does not have as much time to relax in between each stimulus. So these are two methods for the muscle to increase the strength. And just to clarify, the size principle is not based on when we say slow twitch and fast twitch, slow twitch being the first units that we recruit. It doesn't mean that when we move our arms slowly that we're recruiting only slow twitch. And when we move fast, that we recruit fast twitch. That's not what the size principle is. The size principle is that slow twitch, which are small motor units, are the first units that are recruited to produce force, and as we need additional force, we recruit larger and larger motor units, and the larger motor units tend to be fast twitch units. So we look at different ways that muscles increase their force and find that smaller muscles that maybe require greater fine coordination, they tend to increase their force of production more by increasing the rate coding, so the frequency of the stimulus. Whereas larger muscles increase the force of the contraction by recruiting larger motor units. And but in general, we find that as muscles begin to fatigue, as we continue with muscle contractions and they begin to fatigue, the muscle will attempt to maintain the force of production or amount of force produced by recruiting larger motor units as well as increasing the rate coding or the frequency that the motor units are firing. And so what are some of the changes that we see at the muscular level? Well, considering that the major energy source for resistance training because of the greater intensity. Um, we're usually fueled by the phosphagen or the glycolytic systems. And if you recall, these are some of the metabolites that start to accumulate. Hydrogen ions will start to accumulate. Hydrogen ions are produced during glycolysis. We also see a decrease in pH, which makes it more acidic, the muscle environment more acidic. We see more phosphate, and the phosphate, if you recall, to form ATP, creatine phosphate will break off a phosphate group to donate to ADP to synthesize ATP for energy production. So we will see more of this inorganic phosphate. And we also see more ammonia collecting. We also see more phosphate because phosphate is broken off when ATP is used to energize the muscle contraction. And all of these are believed to be factors in what we experience as muscle fatigue. And so because we are using creatine phosphate to resynthesize ATP, we'll see a depletion of creatine phosphate. Because we go into glycolysis, the phosphagen system is quickly depletes. So we have to go to glycolysis to fuel the exercise. And glycogen, though it's not fully depleted, because usually we have 2 hours worth of glycogen stored in our muscles available for higher intensity effort, and we usually don't completely deplete it, but we can diminish the amount of glycogen in our muscles. And so it's very important for us to consume carbohydrate so that we establish our glycogen stores in our muscles, so then for our next workout we have an adequate energy source. And this is a really important point because many times with people who are in resistance training, they only focus on the protein. Well, the protein is what is used to synthesize more contractile protein like actin and myosin that is in the sarcomere to shorten the muscle. But what fuels the muscle contraction is more likely glycolysis, which is glucose. And that can be circulating blood glucose, or it can be glucose that is the result of breaking down muscle glycogen. So restoring carbohydrates in our diet is very important to fueling resistance training. We also have the endocrine system, and we have which release hormones that affect many of our body's functions. And so just like the nervous system directs many of our body's functions, but nervous system tends to be more short acting, whereas hormones, they also direct many of our body's functions, but they can be more long acting. And hormones usually have a target tissue. They're released from specific endocrine glands, and they have a target tissue that they go to with receptor sites for those specific hormones. And we have peptide hormones, which are protein based, and these usually have receptors on the membrane of the cell. And this, for an example, is growth hormone and insulin. And then steroid hormones, which are derivatives of cholesterol, they more so target the nucleus of a cell and affect DNA. And so this would be testosterone and estrogen. So hormones have specific functions, and they're very important to our muscles because they do stimulate synthesis of protein. They are involved in making sure that there are enough substrates available to provide energy for continued exercise and immune function. So these are just a variety of many of the endocrine glands in the body. And we have different types of hormones. We have anabolic and catabolic. Anabolic, if you recall from the previous, I think it was either the previous chapter or the one before that, anabolic means taking smaller molecules and forming larger molecules. So when we talk about anabolic hormones, hormones like testosterone, they're involved in synthesizing protein. So they're involved in increasing the amount of protein, contractile protein in the muscle fiber. And then catabolic is more breaking down from large molecules to smaller molecules. So breaking down glycogen to glucose so that we have a substrate available for energy production. And we also see an increased release of epinephrine and norepinephrine. And they are, in addition to increasing the heart rate and blood pressure, they also affect making fats, free fatty acids, carbohydrates available to produce ATP. So they're making it that we have energy substrates available to form ATP to fuel the effort with resistance training. And we also see with bouts of exercise an increased release of testosterone and growth hormone, and these are going to stimulate synthesizing protein in our muscle. And however, this just shows some of the effects of epinephrine that we just talked about. But as far as testosterone release and other hormones, it is fairly specific to the type of muscular contraction that we do, and finding that high volume, so multiple sets, 8 to 10 repetitions with short rest periods, lifts that involve large muscle groups, multiple joints. These are the types of activities that are going to promote increased testosterone release and greater protein synthesis. So when you look at hypertrophy workouts, this is what usually a workout is designed, where we don't have really low reps as we would with a strength workout. We have these high volume types of workouts. And males produce more testosterone than females, and so that results in greater protein synthesis. And then we see also with the elderly, they do not produce as much of the testosterone or release as much testosterone to stimulate the muscle growth.